Captain Sarah Chen stared at the holographic display floating above her command chair aboard the Earth Defense Force cruiser Valiant. The blue-white projection showed the outer rim colonies, each one represented by a pulsing dot. All except one. New Eden's marker blinked red, then disappeared entirely. Communications, what's our last contact with New Eden? Sarah asked, her voice steady despite the growing knot in her stomach. Lieutenant Rodriguez turned from his station, his dark eyes troubled. Their last transmission came in 47 hours ago, Captain. It was strange. Strange how? Rodriguez's fingers danced across his console, bringing up an audio file. It was from Colony Administrator Williams. The message was cut short, and there was something in the background. Something that doesn't match any known technology. The bridge fell silent as the recording played. Administrator Williams' voice crackled through the speakers, professional but strained. Earth Command, this is New Eden Colony reporting unusual ship movements in our outer system. We're detecting vessels of unknown configuration approaching at high velocity. They're not responding to our hails and, a sound interrupted him. It was like nothing Sarah had ever heard before, a low, harmonic rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very air, followed by what could only be described as the screaming of metal being torn apart. Then, silence. That's where the transmission ends, Rodriguez said quietly. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. New Eden was home to 3 million colonists, including families who had traveled the long journey from Earth to build new lives among the stars. The colony was one of humanity's most successful settlements, a shining example of what people could accomplish when they worked together. Time to New Eden at maximum burn, she asked her navigator. 18 days, Captain, came the reply. Too long. Sarah stood from her chair and walked to the main display. New Eden was marked as the farthest human settlement, sitting on the edge of known space. Beyond it lay the unexplored regions where anything could be hiding. Captain, her tactical officer spoke up. I'm detecting movement in the outer sensor grid. Multiple contacts heading toward the inner colonies. Sarah's blood ran cold. How many? I count at least 50 vessels, ma'am. They're moving faster than anything in our databases. At their current speed, they'll reach Kepler Station in 6 days. The bridge erupted in controlled chaos as officers rushed to their stations. Sarah remained calm, her mind racing through options. The Earth Defense Force had 37 ships in this sector, and they were spread thin protecting the trade routes and colonies. Whatever had happened to New Eden was now heading directly for the heart of human space. Send a priority message to Earth Command, Sarah ordered. Tell them we have a code black situation. Unknown hostiles have potentially destroyed New Eden Colony and are advancing on our positions. As Rodriguez worked to send the message, Sarah studied the tactical display. The approaching contacts moved in perfect formation, maintaining precise distances from each other. This wasn't a random attack or pirates looking for easy targets. This was organized, military, and utterly alien. The communication system crackled to life as Earth Command responded to their message. Admiral Morrison's weathered face appeared on the main screen, his expression grim. Captain Chen, we've received your report. Are you certain about New Eden? Sir, we've lost all contact with the colony. 3 million people, Admiral. They're just gone. Morrison nodded slowly. We're mobilizing everything we have, Captain, but it will take time. The nearest fleet elements are 2 weeks away from your position. What about the colonies between here and Earth? Kepler Station, Terra Nova, the mining facilities? We're sending evacuation orders now, but we both know how well civilians respond to those. Morrison's expression darkened. Captain, whatever's coming your way, you and the ships in your sector are the only thing standing between them and millions of innocent people. Sarah straightened her shoulders. Understood, sir. We'll hold the line. Good luck, Captain. Morrison out. The screen went dark, leaving Sarah alone with the weight of responsibility. She looked around at her crew, seeing fear in some faces, determination in others. These were good people, trained for this moment even if none of them had expected it to come like this. All hands, this is the captain, Sarah spoke into the ship's communication system. By now you've all heard the rumors, so I'll give you the facts. An unknown force has attacked New Eden Colony. We've lost contact with 3 million civilians, and now these same hostiles are moving toward our inner colonies. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy we know nothing about. But we're human, and that means we don't run from a fight when innocent lives are at stake. She paused, looking out at the stars through the bridge's main viewport. Somewhere out there, her enemy was coming. But they had underestimated humanity if they thought one devastating attack would break the spirit of the species that had clawed its way up from the primordial soup to reach the stars. Set course for the Kepler system, Sarah ordered. Maximum burn. And send a message to every ship in the sector. Tell them to converge on our position. It's time to show these aliens what happens when you threaten human civilians. The Valiant turned toward its destination, its fusion engines burning bright against the darkness. Behind it, across dozens of star systems, other ships began to move. Destroyers, frigates, cargo haulers pressed into service, even civilian vessels armed with mining equipment. They came from every corner of human space, united by a simple truth that had driven their species since the beginning of time. Nobody hurt their people and lived to tell about it. 3 days into their journey to Kepler, the first refugees began arriving at Sarah's position. The cargo hauler New Dawn was overcrowded with frightened colonists from the outer settlements, their captain reporting that they had barely escaped before unknown ships destroyed their orbital platforms. They came out of nowhere, Captain Martinez explained as he stood in the Valiant's briefing room. His uniform was stained with sweat and his eyes held the haunted look of a man who had seen too much. Massive ships, bigger than anything we've built. They didn't try to communicate, didn't demand surrender. They just started shooting. Sarah leaned forward in her chair. What did their weapons look like? Energy beams of some kind, but not like our lasers. These were organic somehow. Like veins of lightning that could bend and curve. They cut through our shields like paper and melted our hull plating in seconds. The tactical officer, Commander Hayes, frowned as he made notes on his tablet. What about their ship design? Anything that might tell us about their technology or culture? Martinez shuddered. That's the worst part. The ships looked grown, not built. Like massive insects or sea creatures. And they moved wrong, too fluid for something that big. When they turned, it was like watching a school of fish change direction all at once. Sarah felt the pieces of a terrible puzzle beginning to form in her mind. An enemy that grew their ships instead of building them, weapons that behaved like living things, perfect coordination across multiple vessels. They weren't facing another humanoid species with similar technology. This was something completely alien. How many ships did you see? She asked. At least 100 attacking our settlement alone. And, Captain. Martinez hesitated, then continued. When they were done destroying everything, they didn't leave. They sent smaller craft down to the surface. I think they were taking samples. Or prisoners. The briefing room fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't just an invasion or a territorial dispute. The aliens were studying humanity, learning about them. Which meant this attack on New Eden wasn't the end of their plans. It was just the beginning. Over the following days, more refugees arrived with similar stories. The pattern was always the same: alien ships would appear without warning, destroy all military and infrastructure targets, then send landing parties to collect samples before moving on. They were methodical, efficient, and utterly ruthless. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had assumed that humanity would scatter and run when faced with overwhelming force. Instead, every attack only strengthened human resolve. Every destroyed colony sent its survivors fleeing toward the core worlds, spreading word of the alien threat and demanding action. On Earth, the news of New Eden's destruction had sparked the largest mobilization in human history. Shipyards that had been building cargo haulers and passenger liners were retooled to produce warships. Civilian vessels were requisitioned and armed. The orbital factories around Luna worked around the clock, their automated systems churning out weapons, armor, and ammunition. But Sarah knew that even with Earth's industrial might behind them, it would take months to build enough ships to match the alien fleet. The colonies couldn't wait that long. Someone had to make a stand, to buy time for the reinforcements to arrive. That someone would be her. Captain Rodriguez called from his station. "I'm picking up distress signals from Kepler Station. Multiple alien contacts approaching their position." Sarah moved to the tactical display, watching as red dots swarmed toward the blue marker representing Kepler Station and its 250,000 inhabitants. Her small fleet of 12 ships was still 2 days away at maximum burn. "How long until the aliens reach the station?" she asked. "At their current speed, approximately 6 hours." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, running calculations in her head. Even if they pushed their engines beyond safe limits, they couldn't reach Kepler in time to intercept the alien fleet before it reached the station. But maybe they didn't need to. Communications, open a channel to all ships in the fleet. When the channel was established, Sarah spoke with quiet determination. "All vessels, this is Captain Chen. We're about to ask our ships to do something they weren't designed for. We're going to push our engines past the red line and attempt a micro-jump to reach Kepler Station before the aliens can complete their attack." Micro-jumps were dangerous at the best of times, requiring precise calculations and perfect coordination. Attempting one while pushing engines beyond their safety limits was borderline suicidal. But sometimes the only choice was between certain death and probable death. "I won't lie to you," Sarah continued. "Some of our ships might not survive the jump. But if we don't try, 250,000 people will die in the next few hours. Every ship captain will make their own choice, but the Valiant is making the jump in 30 minutes. One by one, the other ship captains responded with confirmations. 12 ships, representing less than 4,000 crew members, preparing to risk everything to save people they had never met. It was the most human thing Sarah could imagine. 30 minutes later, space around the small human fleet shimmered as reality bent and folded. One moment they were in empty space between stars, the next they were dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system. The sight that greeted them was like something from humanity's worst nightmares. The alien fleet was indeed massive, over 100 ships of varying sizes surrounding Kepler Station like predators circling wounded prey. But it was their appearance that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. Martinez had been right, the ships looked grown rather than built, their hulls curved and organic like the shells of enormous crustaceans. Tendrils of energy danced between them, creating a web of communication or coordination that pulsed with alien intelligence. Kepler Station itself was already heavily damaged, its outer sections venting atmosphere and debris. But the station's defenders were still fighting, their small patrol ships darting between the alien vessels like gnats attacking elephants. "All ships, attack formation Delta," Sarah ordered. "Target the alien vessels attacking the station's defensive platforms. We need to give the civilians time to evacuate." The human fleet accelerated toward the battle, their weapons charging for the fight of their lives. Sarah knew they were vastly outnumbered and outgunned, but they had something the aliens didn't understand. They were fighting for their home. For their families. For the future of their species. And humanity had never learned how to surrender. As the Valiant closed with the nearest alien ship, Sarah could see its hull more clearly. The surface seemed to ripple and shift like living skin, and weapon ports opened and closed like breathing orifices. When it fired, the energy beam that lanced out was indeed organic-looking, twisting through space like a serpent seeking prey. The beam struck the Valiant's shields, causing them to flare and spark, but Sarah's ship kept coming. Human weapons might be primitive compared to alien technology, but they had been built with one purpose in mind: to destroy anything that threatened human life. "All weapons, fire!" Sarah commanded. The Valiant's main guns spoke with thunder and lightning, sending streams of coherent energy and kinetic projectiles toward the alien vessel. To Sarah's amazement, the shots penetrated the creature's hull, causing it to writhe and emit a sound that somehow transmitted through the vacuum of space. Around them, the rest of the human fleet engaged the aliens with desperate courage. The destroyer Defiant rammed an alien ship that was 3 times its size, its hull crumpling on impact but taking the enemy vessel with it. The frigate Hope used its point defense systems to carve through a swarm of smaller alien craft, buying time for a civilian transport to escape. But, for every alien ship they destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. Sarah watched her small fleet being systematically destroyed, their sacrifice buying precious minutes for Kepler station's evacuation. Then, something unexpected happened. The alien fleet began to withdraw. Captain Hayes reported from his tactical station, "The aliens are pulling back. All contacts are moving away from the station." Sarah frowned as she watched the tactical display. The aliens still had overwhelming superiority. They could have easily finished off her remaining ships and completed their attack on the station. Why were they retreating? The answer came in the form of a new contact appearing on long-range sensors. Then, another. Then, dozens more. Multiple hyperspace signatures detected, Rodriguez announced, his voice filled with wonder. "I count 47 ships dropping out of hyperspace at the system's edge." Sarah's heart leaped as she recognized the energy signatures on her sensors. Human ships, more than she had ever seen in one place. Cruisers, battleships, carriers, even some of the massive dreadnoughts that served as Earth's last line of defense. "This is Admiral Morrison aboard the EDS Indomitable," came a familiar voice over the communications system. "Sorry we're late to the party, Captain Chen. How are you holding up?" Sarah looked around her damaged bridge, seeing the faces of her exhausted crew, then, at the tactical display showing her 3 surviving ships surrounded by wreckage. Behind them, Kepler station was damaged but, intact, its population saved by their sacrifice. "We're still here, Admiral," she replied. "Bloodied but not broken." "Good to hear. All human vessels, this is Admiral Morrison. The cavalry has arrived. Let's show these aliens what happens when they pick a fight with humanity." The newly arrived fleet spread out in perfect formation, their weapons powering up as they advanced toward the alien fleet. For the first time since New Eden's destruction, Sarah felt hope blooming in her chest. The aliens had started this war by destroying a peaceful colony. They had underestimated humanity's resolve, thinking that one crushing blow would break their spirit. Instead, they had awakened something that had slept since humanity's violent past. They had awakened the warrior spirit of a species that had climbed to the top of their world's food chain through sheer determination and the willingness to fight for what they believed in. Now the aliens would learn what humans were truly capable of when they were pushed too far. The real war was about to begin. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Kepler Station, and Earth had transformed into something unrecognizable. Where once peaceful cities had sprawled beneath blue skies, now massive industrial complexes stretched to the horizon, their smokestacks reaching toward space elevators that carried a constant stream of raw materials to the orbital shipyards. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the observation deck of Luna's Shipyard Alpha, watching as the skeleton of humanity's newest weapon took shape in the void. The ship was enormous, dwarfing even the largest dreadnoughts in the Earth Defense Force fleet. But size wasn't what made it special. What made it special was that every rivet, every piece of armor plating, every weapon system had been designed specifically to kill the aliens that humanity now called the Devourers. "The neural interface is responding perfectly," reported Chief Engineer Morrison as he reviewed data on his tablet. "The ship's AI is learning to coordinate with human commanders faster than our most optimistic projections." Elena nodded, but her attention was focused on the weapon systems being installed along the massive vessel's hull. After 6 months of studying captured Devourer technology and analyzing battle footage, human scientists had developed new weapons that could penetrate alien bioarmor and disrupt their organic technology. The breakthrough had come from an unlikely source, a xenobiology team studying tissue samples recovered from destroyed Devourer ships. They had discovered that the aliens' biotechnology relied on complex electromagnetic fields to maintain cohesion. Disrupt those fields, and their living ships would literally fall apart. "How many ships will be ready for Operation Prometheus?" Elena asked. Morrison consulted his tablet again. 700,000 vessels of various classes. Everything from single-pilot fighters to the new Titan-class dreadnoughts. It's the largest fleet in human history. Elena felt a mixture of pride and sorrow at those words. The fleet represented an incredible achievement of human engineering and determination. But it also represented the militarization of an entire species. Children who should have been learning about art and literature were instead studying weapons design and alien anatomy. Colonies that should have been expanding peacefully into new worlds were instead being fortified as staging areas for military operations. The Devourers had forced humanity to become something they had never wanted to be, a species entirely focused on war. But perhaps that was what they needed to be to survive. Dr. Vasquez, a voice called from behind her. She turned to see Admiral Morrison approaching, his uniform crisp despite the long hours he had been working to coordinate the massive military buildup. "Admiral," Elena replied with a slight nod. "Come to check on our progress?" "Among other things," Morrison said, moving to stand beside her at the observation window. "I wanted to discuss the psychological profiles of the Devourer prisoners." Elena's expression darkened. In the months since Kepler Station, human forces had managed to capture several smaller Devourer vessels and take their crews prisoner. The aliens themselves were as disturbing as their ships, bipedal creatures with chitinous exoskeletons and multiple sensory organs, but it was their behavior that truly unsettled the human scientists studying them. "They don't communicate," Elena said. "Not in any way we can understand. It's as if they operate on pure instinct, like insects in a hive." "But they're clearly intelligent," Morrison pointed out. "Their tactics are sophisticated, their technology is advanced." "Yes, but it's a different kind of intelligence. Collective rather than individual. Each Devourer seems to be just a component in a larger organism, sharing thoughts and sensations through some kind of biological network." Morrison frowned. "That could explain their coordination in battle. They fight as a single entity rather than individual ships." Elena nodded grimly. "And it means they view us the same way we might view bacteria. Not as fellow sapient beings, but as a disease to be eliminated." They stood in silence for a moment, watching as automated systems continued to assemble the massive warship beyond the observation deck. The vessel was part of humanity's desperate plan to strike back at the Devourer home system, but Elena knew that success would come at a terrible cost. "The psychological impact reports from the colonies are getting worse," she said quietly. "Suicide rates are up 300%. Birth rates have dropped by half. People are losing hope." Morrison's jaw tightened. "Then, we'd better make sure Operation Prometheus succeeds. Because if it doesn't, there won't be a human species left to worry about birth rates." The Admiral was right, Elena knew. The Devourers had continued their systematic destruction of human colonies, moving steadily toward the core worlds despite fierce resistance from Earth Defense Force fleets. Every engagement taught humanity more about their enemy, but it also cost thousands of lives and valuable ships. The pattern was always the same: Devourer fleets would appear without warning, overwhelming local defenses through sheer numbers and superior technology. They would destroy all infrastructure, harvest biological samples, and then move on to the next target. It was methodical, efficient, and utterly merciless. But humanity had learned to be merciless too. Dr. Vasquez, a technician, called from across the observation deck. "We're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command." Elena and Admiral Morrison moved to the communication console where President Martinez's face appeared on the screen. The woman who led Earth's government looked like she had aged 10 years in the past 6 months, her hair now completely gray and deep lines etched around her eyes. "Admiral, Dr. President Martinez said without preamble. I'm afraid I have disturbing news. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected a massive Devourer fleet moving toward the Sol system. Over 5,000 ships, including several of the massive biotitans we encountered at Proxima." Elena felt her blood turn to ice. A fleet that size could overwhelm Earth's orbital defenses and destroy the industrial infrastructure that humanity needed to continue the war. If Earth fell, the scattered colony worlds wouldn't be able to maintain resistance for long. "How long until they reach our outer perimeter?" Morrison asked. 18 days, Martinez replied. "We're evacuating non-essential personnel from the outer colonies and concentrating our defensive fleets around Earth and Luna." "And Operation Prometheus?" Elena asked. Martinez's expression became even more grim. "We're accelerating the timeline. The fleet launches in 72 hours, ready or not." If we can't stop the Devourer advance at its source, then, defending Earth becomes meaningless anyway. The screen went dark, leaving Elena and Morrison alone with the weight of humanity's desperate gamble. In 3 days, 700,000 human ships would leave for Devourer space, attempting to destroy the aliens' home system before they could complete their conquest of humanity. It was a plan born of desperation and fury, but it was the only chance their species had left. Over the next 72 hours, Luna's shipyard became a hive of frantic activity. Ships that were only 80% complete were rushed into service, their missing systems replaced with whatever was available. Crews who had been training for months were suddenly thrown together with strangers and told to learn to work as a team during the journey to alien space. Elena found herself aboard the command ship Retribution, a massive vessel that served as the fleet's mobile headquarters. The ship's bridge was a marvel of human engineering, with holographic displays showing the positions of every vessel in the fleet and real-time tactical analysis of potential enemy positions. Captain Sarah Chen had been promoted to Fleet Admiral and given command of the operation. Her experience fighting the Devourers made her the obvious choice, despite her relatively young age. She stood at the center of the bridge, studying fleet formations with the focused intensity that had made her famous throughout human space. "Final ship count?" Sarah asked her operations officer. 700,000, 12 ships reporting ready for departure, came the reply. That includes everything from single-pilot fighters to the new Omega-class dreadnoughts. Elena marveled at the numbers. Humanity had built more ships in 6 months than in the previous century combined. Every orbital facility, every asteroid mining operation, every industrial world had been converted to military production. The economic cost would bankrupt human civilization, but there would be no civilization left to worry about economics if they failed. "Navigation, plot our course to the target system," Sarah ordered. "All ships are to maintain communication silence until we reach the jump point. We get one chance at surprise, and I don't want to waste it." The fleet began to move, 700,000 ships accelerating away from the solar system in perfect formation. Elena watched the tactical display as humanity's greatest armada departed for war, knowing that many of the people aboard those ships would never see Earth again. The journey to Devourer space took 14 days through hyperspace, during which the fleet maintained absolute radio silence to avoid detection. Elena spent the time reviewing intelligence reports and coordinating with the science teams that would analyze any alien technology they encountered. But she also spent time walking through the ship's corridors, talking to the crew members who would soon be fighting for the survival of their species. These were ordinary people, engineers, farmers, students who had volunteered for military service when the war began. They weren't professional soldiers, but they had something that Elena knew the Devourers lacked: the ability to choose their own fate. "My daughter was at New Eden," a young gunner told Elena during one of their conversations. "She was studying marine biology at the university there. I don't know if she escaped or..." He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "This is for her," Elena said quietly. "For everyone we've lost, and everyone we still have a chance to save." The gunner nodded, his jaw set with determination. They picked the wrong species to mess with. It was a sentiment Elena heard repeated throughout the fleet. The Devourers had expected humanity to break when faced with overwhelming force. Instead, they had forged it into something harder and more dangerous than it had ever been before. On the 14th day, the fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the target system. What they found there defied all expectations. The Devourer home system was unlike anything in human experience. Instead of planets orbiting a star, massive biological structures floated in space like gigantic organs. Ships moved between them in organic formations, tending to the living infrastructure like antibodies in a vast organism. "My God," whispered the sensor operator. "It's all alive. The entire system is one massive creature." Elena stared at the sensor readings in wonder and horror. They weren't looking at a civilization in any human sense of the word. This was something far more alien than they had imagined, a collective organism that had grown to encompass an entire solar system. "Contact count?" Sarah asked, her voice steady despite the incredible sight before them. "I'm reading over 100,000 Devourer ships of various sizes," the tactical officer reported. "Plus those massive biostructures that could potentially serve as weapons platforms." Elena felt her heart sink. Even with their massive fleet, humanity was still outnumbered. But they had come too far to turn back now. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen," Sarah broadcast to the fleet. "You're looking at the heart of the enemy that destroyed New Eden and threatens all of human space. Today we're going to cut that heart out. All vessels, attack formation Alpha. Target the largest biostructures first, then focus on the ship concentrations." 700,000 human ships powered up their weapons and accelerated toward the alien system. The largest fleet in human history was about to engage in the most important battle their species had ever fought. As the Retribution led the charge into the alien system, Elena found herself thinking about the children who would inherit whatever came next. Would they grow up free under human skies, or would they become extinct along with their parents? The answer would be decided in the next few hours. "Incoming transmission from the Planet Killers," reported the communications officer. "They're moving to intercept." Elena looked at the tactical display, watching as the massive Devourer Biotitans began to turn toward the approaching human fleet. These were the ships that had destroyed entire worlds, each one capable of cracking a planet's crust and consuming its biomass. But humanity had not come unprepared. "Launch the Nova torpedoes," Sarah ordered. From the launch bays of the human dreadnoughts came weapons that represented the pinnacle of human destructive capability. The Nova torpedoes were equipped with modified stellar cores, each one capable of creating a miniature sun when it detonated. They had been designed specifically to destroy the massive Devourer Biotitans that conventional weapons couldn't penetrate. The first torpedo struck a Biotitan that was easily 50 kilometers long. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the creature's hull began to glow as nuclear fire spread through its organic systems. The Biotitan convulsed like a dying whale before exploding in a burst of plasma that lit up space for hundreds of kilometers around. Around the system, other Nova torpedoes found their targets. Massive explosions bloomed like flowers of destruction as humanity's most powerful weapons struck at the heart of the Devourer Collective. But the aliens were far from defenseless. Swarms of smaller Devourer ships rose from the biostructures like antibodies responding to infection. Their organic weapons reached out across space, lancing through human ships with beams that could slice through the strongest armor humanity had developed. The battle became a chaotic melee as 700,000 human ships clashed with over 100,000 Devourer vessels. Elena watched the tactical display in horrified fascination as entire formations were wiped out in seconds, only to be replaced by fresh waves of attacking ships. The human fighters were outnumbered but not outmatched. Their pilots had trained for this moment, studying every recorded engagement with Devourer forces. They knew the aliens' weaknesses and how to exploit them. Squadrons of fighters swarmed around the larger Devourer ships, using their superior maneuverability to avoid the organic weapons while targeting the electromagnetic nodes that held the alien bioarmor together. When those nodes were destroyed, the living ships literally fell apart. "We're breaking through their outer defense perimeter," reported the tactical officer. "The path to the central biostructure is opening up." Elena could see it on the display, a massive organism at the heart of the system that seemed to coordinate all Devourer activity. If they could destroy it, they might be able to cripple the entire collective. But reaching it would require flying through a maze of Devourer defenses, and humanity was already paying a terrible price. The fleet had lost over 200,000 ships in the first hour of fighting alone. "All remaining Nova torpedo-equipped ships, converge on the central structure," Sarah ordered. "Everything else, provide covering fire. We're going to end this war today." As the human fleet pressed deeper into the alien system, Elena realized that they had accomplished something the Devourers never expected. They had forced the collective to fight defensively, to protect their home instead of expanding their conquest. For the first time since New Eden's destruction, humanity was dictating the terms of battle. The war was far from over, but the tide was finally beginning to turn. The central biostructure loomed before the human fleet like a living nightmare. It was impossibly vast, easily the size of a small moon, its surface crawling with organic conduits that pulsed with alien energy. Smaller structures budded from its main mass like tumors, each one serving some unknown function in the Devourer Collective's hive mind. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching as her remaining ships formed up for the final assault. The cost of reaching this point had been staggering. Of the 700,000 vessels that had entered the system, fewer than 300,000 remained combat effective. The space around them was littered with the wreckage of both human and alien ships, a graveyard of twisted metal and organic matter. Target analysis complete, reported Dr. Vasquez from her science station. We've identified what appears to be the structure's central nervous system. It's heavily protected, but if we can penetrate the outer shell and deliver Nova torpedoes directly to the core, we should be able to disrupt the entire network. Sarah nodded grimly. They had come too far and lost too much to turn back now. Every human ship destroyed represented thousands of lives lost, families that would never be reunited, dreams that would never be fulfilled. But their sacrifice would be meaningless if they couldn't complete the mission. Distance to target, she asked. 50,000 kilometers and, closing, her navigator replied. But, Admiral, we're detecting massive energy buildups throughout the structure. I think it's preparing some kind of defense mechanism. Sarah wasn't surprised. The Devourers had been forced into a defensive position for the first time since the war began, and they were clearly preparing to unleash everything they had to protect their central mind. All ships, prepare for maximum defensive fire, she ordered. Whatever they're planning to throw at us, we're going to push through it. The central biostructure began to change as they watched. Portions of its surface split open like flowering buds, revealing weapon systems unlike anything in the human database. These weren't the organic beam weapons they had encountered before, but something far more sophisticated. Energy crackled between massive bioelectrical nodes, building toward a discharge that would dwarf anything humanity had ever witnessed. Energy spike detected, called the sensor operator, his voice tight with concern. Power levels are off the scale. Whatever that thing is charging up, it's big enough to destroy half our remaining fleet. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. They had assumed that reaching the central structure would be the hardest part of the mission. Now it appeared that the real battle was just beginning. The alien weapon fired. Space itself seemed to tear open as a wave of destructive energy swept outward from the biostructure. It wasn't a focused beam but, rather a widespread pulse that caused reality to ripple and distort. Ships caught in its path simply ceased to exist, not destroyed but somehow erased as if they had never been there at all. 50,000 human vessels vanished in an instant. Evasive maneuvers. Sarah shouted, but she knew it was too late for many of her ships. The energy wave was expanding faster than anything could outrun it. Then, something unexpected happened. The wave slowed, then stopped, then began to collapse back in on itself. On the tactical display, Sarah could see what was happening. Ships throughout the fleet were firing their Nova torpedoes not at the biostructure, but at the energy wave itself. The stellar cores within the torpedoes were creating localized gravity wells that disrupted the alien weapon's coherence. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the destroyer Defiant," came a voice over the communications system. "All ships with Nova torpedoes, target the energy distortions. We can break up their weapon if we work together." It was brilliant improvisation born of desperation. Instead of trying to avoid the alien superweapon, humanity was attacking it directly, using their most powerful weapons to tear holes in the fabric of the energy wave. More torpedoes struck the distortion, each explosion creating a zone of normal spacetime that the alien energy couldn't penetrate. Like antibodies attacking a virus, the human fleet was systematically destroying the weapon that should have annihilated them. "All remaining ships, concentrate fire on the central structure's weapon nodes," Sarah ordered. "If we can destroy those energy collectors, they won't be able to charge another shot." The human fleet surged forward, their weapons blazing. Fighters dove through swarms of defensive organisms, their pilots displaying impossible courage as they flew directly into the heart of the alien stronghold. Larger ships used their main guns to pound at the biostructure's outer shell, gradually penetrating the living armor that protected its vital systems. Dr. Vasquez worked frantically at her station, analyzing the alien structure's responses to their attacks. "Admiral, I'm detecting patterns in their defensive fire. The structure is trying to protect specific areas. If we can identify what's so important about those locations." "Do it," Sarah replied. "Find their weak spots. As the battle raged around the central biostructure, a smaller drama was playing out throughout human space. The massive Devourer fleet that had been advancing on Earth had suddenly stopped, their ships becoming sluggish and uncoordinated. Without the guidance of their central mind, the collective was beginning to break down. Captain Martinez, now commanding the defense of Earth from the orbital fortress sanctuary, watched in amazement as the alien fleet began to turn away from the inner system. "They're retreating," reported his tactical officer. "All Devourer ships are pulling back toward the outer rim." Martinez felt a surge of hope. Could it be that Admiral Chen's desperate gambit was actually working? Were they successfully disrupting the alien collective's command structure? "Maintain pursuit," he ordered. "I want every ship we can spare harassing their retreat. Don't give them time to reorganize." Similar scenes were playing out across human space as the Devourer advance ground to a halt. Without the coordinating influence of their central mind, individual alien ships became confused and directionless. They still fought when cornered, but their previous tactical superiority had evaporated. Back in the alien home system, the battle for the central biostructure was reaching its climax. Human ships pressed closer to their target despite devastating losses, their crews driven by the knowledge that the fate of their entire species hung in the balance. "I've found it," Dr. Vasquez announced suddenly. The central nervous cluster is located in the structure's northern hemisphere, approximately 2 kilometers beneath the outer shell. It's heavily protected, but there are thermal vents that provide access routes. Sarah studied the tactical display, seeing the narrow passages that led deep into the alien structure. They were barely wide enough for a single ship, and they were certain to be heavily defended. "This is going to require a volunteer mission," she said quietly. "A small force to penetrate the structure and deliver Nova torpedoes directly to the target." Around the bridge, officers began volunteering immediately. They all understood what the mission meant: whoever went into that structure would almost certainly not come back out. But they also understood that someone had to do it. "I'll lead the mission," Sarah said, cutting off the volunteers. "The Retribution is fast enough to make the run, and experienced enough to navigate those passages." "Admiral, you can't," Dr. Vasquez began to protest. "I can and I will," Sarah interrupted firmly. "This is my responsibility. Besides, who else has more experience fighting these things?" She turned to address the entire fleet over the communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. I'm taking a small force into the central structure to deliver the final blow. Continue your attack on the outer defenses and keep the aliens distracted. Whatever happens to us, complete the mission." The Retribution and 5 escort ships broke away from the main fleet, accelerating toward the thermal vents that Dr. Vasquez had identified. Behind them, the rest of the human fleet intensified their attack, drawing the biostructure's defenses away from the vulnerable access points. As they approached the alien structure, Sarah could see its surface in terrifying detail. The hull wasn't just alive, it was aware. Sensory organs tracked their approach while defensive systems prepared to repel invaders. This wasn't just a ship or a space station, but a living creature of unimaginable intelligence and malevolence. "Entering the thermal vent in 10 seconds, reported the helmsman. "Sir, these passages are going to be tight. One wrong move and we'll be crushed against the walls." "Then, don't make any wrong moves," Sarah replied with more confidence than she felt. The Retribution dove into the alien structure like a submarine entering an underwater cave. The walls of the thermal vent glowed with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to pulse in rhythm with some vast heartbeat. Smaller passages branched off from the main route, leading deeper into the structure's organic maze. "I'm detecting movement in the side passages," warned the tactical officer. "Something big is coming our way." On the display, Sarah could see massive shapes moving through the structure's internal passages. They were some kind of defense organism, probably adapted specifically for dealing with invaders who managed to penetrate the outer shell. "All ships, maximum speed," she ordered. "We need to reach the central nervous cluster before those things catch us." The small human force raced through the alien passages, their ships barely fitting through the organic tunnels. Behind them, the defense organisms gave chase, their forms too alien to comprehend fully but clearly designed for one purpose: to destroy intruders. "There!" Dr. Vasquez called out, pointing at the tactical display. The central chamber, directly ahead. They burst out of the thermal vent into a vast internal cavity that seemed to stretch for kilometers in every direction. At the center of the space hung a pulsing mass of neural tissue, connected to the rest of the structure by thousands of nerve bundles. It was simultaneously beautiful and horrifying, the physical manifestation of the collective intelligence that had orchestrated the destruction of human colonies. All ships, target the central mass, Sarah ordered. Fire every Nova torpedo we have. The human ships opened fire, their weapons blazing toward the alien brain. But the central nervous cluster was not defenseless. Energy fields sprang up around it, deflecting some of the torpedoes while the rest detonated harmlessly against biological armor. The defenses are too strong, reported the weapons officer. We can't penetrate from this distance. Sarah knew what had to be done. There was only one way to ensure that the torpedoes reached their target. All ships, prepare for ramming speed, she announced. We're going to deliver these torpedoes by hand. It was suicide, and everyone on the bridge knew it. But it was also the only way to guarantee success. Admiral, Dr. Vasquez said quietly, it's been an honor serving with you. The honor has been mine, Doctor, Sarah replied. All ships, attack speed. For humanity. The 5 human ships accelerated toward the central nervous cluster, their hulls groaning under the strain of maximum thrust. The alien defenses fired everything they had, but the ships kept coming, their crews united in their determination to complete the mission. The Retribution struck first, its armored prow penetrating deep into the neural tissue before its Nova torpedoes detonated. The explosion tore through the central nervous cluster like lightning through a brain, causing the entire structure to convulse in agony. The other ships followed, each one adding its own destructive power to the assault. Within moments, the coordination center of the Devourer Collective was nothing more than expanding plasma and neural debris. Throughout the alien system, the effect was immediate and catastrophic. Ships stopped functioning as their connection to the central mind was severed. The massive biostructures began to collapse as their coordinating intelligence died. In human space, the retreating Devourer fleet suddenly went completely inactive, their ships drifting helplessly through the void. The war was over. But victory had come at a terrible price. Of the 700,000 ships that had departed Earth, fewer than 100,000 returned home. Entire colonies had been destroyed, and millions of humans had died in the fighting. The economic and social cost of the war would take generations to recover from. Dr. Vasquez found herself back on Luna, standing in the same observation deck where she had watched the Great Fleet depart 6 months earlier. But now, instead of ships under construction, she could see the first refugee transports returning from the war zone. The survivors of Admiral Chen's fleet, bringing word of humanity's ultimate victory over the Devourer threat. The preliminary reports are coming in, said Admiral Morrison as he joined her at the window. The alien collective appears to be completely disrupted. Individual Devourer ships are either inactive or operating on basic instincts only. Without their central coordination, they're no longer a threat to human space. Elena nodded, but she felt no joy at the news. Too many good people had died to purchase this victory. Sarah Chen, whose brilliant leadership had saved human civilization, would never see the peace she had fought so hard to achieve. What about the colonies? Elena asked. The ones that were destroyed? We're already planning reconstruction efforts, Morrison replied. It will take decades, but we'll rebuild. Humans always rebuild. Elena looked out at the stars, thinking about the future that lay ahead. The war had changed humanity in fundamental ways. They were no longer the peaceful species that had set out to explore the galaxy with optimism and wonder. They had learned that the universe could be hostile and unforgiving, that sometimes survival required terrible choices. But they had also learned something else. They had learned that when pushed to the edge of extinction, humanity would not go quietly into the dark. They would fight with everything they had, sacrifice everything they valued, and pay any price necessary to ensure that their children would see tomorrow's dawn. The Devourers had made one crucial mistake when they destroyed New Eden Colony. They had assumed that humanity would be easy prey, that a few devastating attacks would break their spirit and scatter them across the galaxy. Instead, they had awakened the warrior spirit of a species that had climbed from the primordial soup to the stars through sheer determination and the willingness to fight for what they believed in. Humanity had struck back with 700,000 warships, and, in doing so, they had secured their place among the stars for generations to come. The colonies would be rebuilt, the dead would be remembered, and the human spirit would endure. The war was over, but the legend of humanity's greatest victory was just beginning. Years later, when children in the rebuilt colonies asked about the war against the Devourers, they would be told the story of how their species faced extinction and chose to fight back. They would learn about the men and women who sacrificed everything to preserve human freedom, and about Admiral Sarah Chen, whose name would be remembered as long as humans traveled between the stars. But, most importantly, they would learn that when faced with the choice between surrender and resistance, humanity had chosen to resist. And, in making that choice, they had proven that some things are worth fighting for, no matter what the cost. The stars belong to humanity now, bought and paid for with the blood of heroes. And, never again would any alien species make the mistake of underestimating what humans would do to protect their own.